1975, South Bronx, New York City. Teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, New York was a city in crisis, lacking its traditional resolve. Entire neighborhoods of the South Bronx had been devastated by arson and resembled cities ravaged by war. The city assumed possession of more than 100,000 units of housing left abandoned by landlords. Entering office in January 1978, Mayor Ed Koch set out to lift the city's spirit and regain its vitality. In 2012 and 2013, honor students from LaGuardia Community College met with former Mayor Ed Koch and members of his administration to discuss their response to the housing crisis.
And we really want to inspire the students both to understand their history, but also, frankly, to aspire to be you, to be public servants, and to understand what it means to work in this city.
So we had the honor of meeting Winifred Campbell, who is a Bronx native and actually gave us a tour of the South Bronx and Boston Road, and took us around and really gave vivid description of what the South Bronx was like when she was growing up there.
Definitely in 1970 is when you began to feel the gang activity, the drugs, the arson, and at that point you would just see building after building, family after family leaving.
What was shocking was how fast some of these buildings just disappeared. And what happened was the economy went into free fall, and so some of these properties just became uneconomic. It was impossible to make them exist.
I don't remember the actual fires. I just remember the aftermath of it. Like, you went to bed and there was a building on the corner with people in it, and then you woke up in the morning and you saw how flames leave the black on top of the windows, and the buildings were abandoned.
Landlords just abandoned the buildings, and the city became the ultimate owner of these buildings, and then they just deteriorated to the point where the city didn't have money because there was a recession. The private sector didn't have money because there was no way to make money from the tenants or the buyers of property, and so it was a big problem. And so you wound up with just vast areas of open space in Bronx and Brooklyn that were at one time neighborhoods, and it was a real tragedy.
By the 80s, New York City's economy is doing much better. That you're seeing the rise of service sector jobs that people are coming into. The finance, insurance, and real estate sectors of the economy are growing. Now, the benefits aren't uniformly felt all over, but that by the 80s, that those improvements and the improvements in New York City's budget is going to allow a 10-year housing program to take place, because they now finally have the money to think about what to do with this in-rem housing.
The idea was to try to jumpstart the housing production and to try to get the private sector back in, and then at the same time use the public sector in a way that had never been used.
Cities don't build housing. The federal government builds housing, and the state government, to a lesser extent, builds housing. But the city of New York, or any other city, does not build housing. It uses its monies for other services. The fact is, there was no alternative. If the alternative was no housing.
So Mayor Koch, in 1986, he has his press conference unveiling his housing plan. And what she wanted to start a mass production of construction of renewal of these abandoned buildings.
Today I'm pleased to announce that I will implement a series of recommendations included in a report by the Mayor's panel on affordable housing. The report recommends major changes in the city's building code, zoning laws, tax policies, and environmental review procedures, and the purpose of these proposed changes is to stimulate construction of large-scale, moderate-income housing by the private sector.
We're basically talking about working people from about $15,000, $20,000 to $48,000 in terms of annual income. The proposal is to try to allow anybody who would build those kinds of units, for that targeted population, housing in the city of New York, we would avail them the benefits of the changes that we're proposing and suggesting today.
We will work with developers. We'll tell developers, you want to come in, you work for a defined fee that is limited. So you say, let's say, I'm willing to work for $5,000 a house, and we will set up a mechanism to make sure he only makes his $5,000. Any savings that we make happen through our programs will be passed on to the ultimate homeowner or the ultimate renter, so therefore the houses will become more affordable.
And we wanted the middle class to have part of this, and we wanted the working poor to have part of this, and we also wanted people who were at the very bottom of the economic ladder and who needed help to have a part of it.
And the number one thing that was done was to take the city capital money, the money that builds parks, schools, and hospitals, spend that money for housing, which had never been done before. And then not just spend it a little bit, spend it a lot.
It wasn't only just the government, and it wasn't just only Koch's administration getting involved in creating these buildings and creating these homes, but it was also the community themselves.
The Mid-Bronx Desperados was really young people who sort of took over a building that was abandoned, and they decided they were going to fix the building up anyway by themselves. And so the conversation was, they started to work in a building and they were doing something illegal. They took private property, but they were doing something that was good. They carried everything up by hand, and they would take water from the fire hydrants, and we shouldn't say too much about this, but they would take electric from the street poles to make it work. So they were really sort of grassroots making something happen. And we, in the end, instead of kicking them out, we worked out a situation where they were able to incorporate, become the legal owners of this building and transfer the property to them, and allowed them to manage first that building and then another building, and before you know it, they had like a little neighborhood of themselves operating a neighborhood.
That was the area that they would always bring the president, whether it was Reagan or Carter or some foreign dignitary, because it looked like, and it was always referred to as bombed out Berlin. I mean, it was a wreck, and nobody lived in that area. And we built ranch houses that, you'd find out in Great Neck. You had to attract people. Nobody wanted to live in the South Bronx. So we were willing to subsidize that housing.
Even when Charlotte Street was built, they were still amid vacant buildings. I mean, these people are pioneers. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because no one really believed after the devastation of the South Bronx that there was any redeeming quality here and that anything was going to work. So once these folks moved in, then all of a sudden it's like, there may be some hope and some possibility here.
We would meet regularly. We would meet every Friday, is my recollection, in the late afternoon. And I said, you'll tell me what your successes are, you'll tell me what your failures are, and we'll all work it out together. And I knew, and Paul touched upon it, that if commissioners who were not in housing knew that that was the city's priority, that they would cooperate.
You think building housing is just putting bricks and mortars together, but it's so much more. The house needs a water and sewer connection, which is the responsibility of Department of Environmental Protection. It has to be on a street. It's the responsibility of the Department of Transportation.
Right.
It needs fire and safety protection, responsibility of the fire department. When you're building it, it needs the protection of the police department. Now, all these agencies, if they're on their own agenda, can do pretty much what they choose. And unless they choose to help you, then you don't get help. But the fact that we're in a Friday afternoon meeting with the mayor, all the commissioners are very smart people, and they're very sensitive to criticism from the mayor. So it didn't take much to say, now listen, I can put this on the agenda at the Friday meeting. And I said, oh, we'll put the sewer guy will be there tomorrow. Don't worry about this. And, so it eliminated a lot of the problems that we had.
As the community started growing, that means that schools started filling up. There was jobs starting to come about. There was more of a job market in the South Bronx, and also hospitals and housing. And now you actually have police cars driving around, and fire actually functioning firehouses, and it became a bustling community again.
It was a tremendous success because had we not built and invested on the scale that we did at the time that we did, I don't think any of this would have happened.
Now you go through some of these neighborhoods, there is a school there, and there is a park here, and there is low-income, low-rise housing, and then there are some single-family houses, and then some high-rise buildings, and that's what neighborhoods are about. That's what New York City is all about.
When I was in Colombia, I always had this idea that New York and the United States was always like a perfect country, and I never knew that it would also struggle to become what it is right now. I went to Times Square, I went to all these places, and it never came through my mind that such nice places surrounded by so many people from different cultures would have gone through all this struggle to be what it is right now.
When I began this project, it was mind-blowing the true devastation that New York City was really going through. That surprised me, and it also made me get a sense of appreciation of the people that made it function, made it work, and in a sense an inspiration too.
Those are all things that I had never even envisioned seeing myself in that I do now. Like I'm actually, looking forward to taking, classes that deal with, being a public service representative, just because I see the power that they, Mayor Ed Koch and his administration, what they did and the decision that they made that led to the way that the city is now. It's something that really, it grasped me, it grabbed my heart. This is something that I can do.